Hello, listeners, and thank you for hanging out tonight with me and my friends. Welcome to the show. Do you like to drink water? Of course you do. We all do. And if you don't, you need to be. I want to tell you about one of the coolest water bottles on the market right now, the Zendo collapsible water bottle. One of the things that I have a hard time with when it comes to drinking water, whether it's at work or on the go, is what to do with the bottle. Yeah, you got your favorite old trusty water bottle that maybe your spouse or your mom bought for you for Christmas or your birthday, but this water bottle does something that no other before ever has. It's fully collapsible. Remember crushing a soda can down to a pancake for recycling? This is the same thing, only this container is made of 100% BPA-free food-grade foldable silicone, and it's 100% FDA approved to ensure no odors and a clean water taste. It's leak-proof, watertight, and easy to clean, and each purchase comes with a collapsible straw. Whether you're climbing a mountain or spending the day in the office, Zendo is the only water bottle that you'll ever need. And you know what's really wild? This is not a paid ad. I picked up one of these and I think it's so innovative that I wanted to tell you all about it. Head to ZendoOutdoors.com to learn more and pick yours up today. Emma, I've been anxiously awaiting this interview. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Chris, I've been excited about this as well. I've seen you've had some awesome work on other podcasts, and I'm excited to see what this new one has in store.
Well, thank you. It's an honor coming from you. I really appreciate it. It's funny. Usually when I interview folks for this show specifically, we've probably done maybe 9 or 10 episodes we've recorded now. It's because I either know them personally, I've worked with them in a professional context. But I remember I came across one of your tweets, and I don't even remember which one it was, but I sort of started like Twitter stalking your profile because I loved the tweets. I really loved kind of like the way you. Just the style of your balance between different aspects of your life. And I really wanted to have you on the show. I thought you'd be the perfect guest to kick this whole thing off with. I guess the first thing I want to do tonight is to ask you to give everyone that will be listening to this a little snapshot of your education and your professional background thus far.
Sure. So I actually was homeschooled all the way through high school. And I graduated from high school pretty early at age 16, and I actually planned to take a gap year. And that kind of didn't work out, so I went to NC State University as a 16-year-old.
Wow.
I started off majoring in genetics, and my kind of love and passion for genetics began sort of in 5th grade. I took a science test and did pretty well on it. My parents were like, "Where is this coming from?" Neither of my parents are scientists, and no one else in my family is, so I just really fell in love with biology when I took high school biology, and then had the opportunity to get involved in a lab my senior year of high school.
Wow.
So I entered NC State as a geneticist, and about a semester in, I added on an English major as well. Back in high school, I've always loved reading and writing and just processing ideas through reading as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of added on this major, had some extra credits from community college and dual enrollment, so that helped me be able to still graduate on time with 2 majors. But honestly, it was one of the best things I did.
You mentioned homeschool. My son is homeschooled. He's 10, and my wife and I have sort of this constant struggle. I have so much respect for homeschool, parents, homeschool educators, and just all of that. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of being homeschooled? I mean, kind of being where you are now and kind of going through homeschool as long as you did. Do you think that's something? Do you endorse it? I mean, as far as homeschool is concerned, do you think that's a good idea?
I loved it. It gave me so much flexibility to pursue interests. Like I mentioned, that I could work in a lab my high school year. I was able to take lots of different classes, like in logic was one of my favorite classes, or different essay writing classes. And contrary to popular belief, if you're a homeschooler, you're still in contact with people. So you make friends, and it's a great way. I had a really awesome relationship with my parents, and I enjoyed spending time with them. And we would do readings together and go out and do all of these experiences that you wouldn't be able to do in a normal school. Yeah. I mean, yes, you take your field trips in normal school, but we would go all over and go on hiking trips and science trips. And it worked really well for me. I'm a very self-motivated learner, so my mom could just kind of say, "Hey, here's what you need to do for the week," and then I could just choose to get it done when I wanted to.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot as I was kind of getting into science. I was able to pursue it on my own, and my parents didn't have a background or training in that, so they were able to kind of direct me to people to help cultivate that.
Yeah. And you mentioned you sort of kind of got the love or I guess the bug for I guess just science in general, like around the fifth grade time period. I mean, what was that like for you as far as just kind of having that natural curiosity that just, in science and just kind of how things work?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was the natural curiosity, just wondering, why is the sky blue, or what makes the leaves green? It really kind of hit home. One of my childhood friends actually was diagnosed with cancer. I think I was 12.
Wow.
And at that point, when she passed away, I wondered, well, why did this happen? Why can't people fix this? And I wanted to be the one to fix it so that I wouldn't have to see other families grieve like her family's grieved.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that definitely like put me on the path of, okay, I want to be in science to help people, and kind of brought me to genetics at State.
And that's a great segue. So let me ask you this. If I ask you to give me an elevator pitch on genetics and what it is, what's that sound like?
I'd say genetics is all about learning about our bodies in a
Yeah.
very basic sense. Genetics is kind of like the instruction manual that tells your body what to do and how to do it. So if you think of, many of you guys are probably familiar with the concept of DNA, but DNA is basically this instruction manual for your body. So you have certain instructions on how to make blood cells or how to make brain cells. And this is all coded in this instruction manual. And what genetics is looking at is trying to understand how to read this manual, and also what are the different alterations that can happen in this manual, maybe to cause issues in those blood cells or those brain cells. People are also seeing that this manual has these highlights or this bolded text. And what this text can do is it allows your body to express genes or proteins in different ways. So genetics is kind of this crazy field where we're learning so much because we know the sequence of the human genome. We've known that since 2001, so for a long time. But we're still understanding what that sequence does and how it does it.
And it's funny as you're talking about this, I have to ask, like, how many scientific questions or just questions about genetics do you get like on a daily basis? I'm just curious.
On a daily basis, I get. Oh yeah, I mean, like if I go out to dinner with people, they're like, "Oh, is this genetic or is this genetic? Is me eating my food and smacking my lips, does that make it genetic?" And I'm
Right.
like, "No, most things there's a lot of environmental component too."
Yeah.
But I probably get the most questions about my red hair because I have natural red hair, and that's normally considered very genetic.
Yeah, I read something online, and you can myth bust. I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, it was a long time ago, but is like are natural or people that are naturally redheaded, is that like in danger or something? I read something about like that's in danger or something like that because of how many people are actually kind of, obviously they're mixing and everything as we kind of grow as a society grows. Like, as a natural redhead, is that like something that's not going to be a thing in the next X amount of years, or did I read that wrong?
So that's a common misconception and has to do with genetic inheritance.
Ah.
So red hair is one of those traits that we would say is a recessive trait. So you have to have two copies of the recessive. You have to have two copies of the red hair gene that would then allow you to have red hair. There are other traits like Huntington's disease or some
Yeah.
like a dwarfism where it's dominant. So if you have one copy, if one of your parents has Huntington's disease, it's going to pass on directly to you. So red hair is a trait that we say can kind of like hide in generations. So you can have generations of people who don't have red hair, and then dang, there's a redheaded baby right there. So it's one of those. But red hair is also interesting because when I did 23andMe, they test for red hair, and I was like, okay, of course, I'm going to have 100% chance of having red hair because I obviously have red hair.
Yeah.
And they said for people with my genotype, which is what my genes are, that they're only 6% likely to have red hair.
Wow.
So there must be a lot of other environmental components with red hair that we don't even know about.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's really, and it's funny. And this is off topic of that, but my wife is full-blooded Hispanic, and when you look at her, it's funny. Like, we're born and raised in Southern California, so like that's where I'm from. I'm around Hispanic, 99% Hispanic all around. All my friends are Hispanic, everybody, and met my wife, and full Hispanic, but she's got like blonde hair, green eyes. She's lighter than I am, lighter skin than me.
Wow.
And it's the weirdest thing, because when I first met her and I was introducing her to my friends, and say, oh no, she's 100% Hispanic, or no, she's a white girl, like that's a white girl fully, right? I was, no, she's 100% Hispanic. Like, both her parents born and raised in Mexico. She's the first generation in the United States. But like, if you look at her sister, her brother, they don't look Hispanic. And I think that's like a misconception. I think it's like, oh well, if like these people have this idea of like black or white or Mexican or whatever it is, or red hair or whatever, like they have this like misconception where it's very like visibly specific, you know what I mean, as like what someone should look like. And it's just not that way anymore.
Right. And I mean, you kind of see it too when people do 23andMe and they get their ancestry results back. They find out, oh, I'm this sort of ethnicity, and they then identify as that. So once you know about your genes, it almost seems like your genes trump what you look like. But more and more people are doing like research into sociology and genetics to try and understand, well, how we think about our genes, how does it affect what we're thinking about the world, which I think is a fascinating topic, because we don't think about genetics in a lot of the proper ways, especially in terms of like race and other kind of controversial things like criminality and
yeah, that's very true. What is 23andMe done for I mean, because 23andMe seems like it's blown up in the last couple of years. It feels like it's really been a big, I mean, I don't know if it's been something that was really common years ago and it was something that just wasn't kind of under the radar, but in the last couple of years 23andMe has really become a huge thing.
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with the price of genome sequencing. So back when they sequenced the first human genome, I think it was like $1 billion to sequence it.
Wow.
And now you can go and get your whole genome sequenced for $1,000. So 23andMe, they don't sequence your whole genome, but they'll just sequence certain parts of your DNA to get information. And they've just have an amazing marketing team that kind of makes this really accessible to people. And if you've ever, I don't know if you've done 23andMe, but you go into your results, it's super flashy, it's bright, it tells you, oh, you're likely to have a widow's peak or not like asparagus, and it shows you this beautiful map of where you're from in ancestry, and also goes into your disease risks too.
Yeah.
But with 23andMe, I was really gung-ho about it, and then the more, after I did 23andMe about a year ago, and as I've done kind of more research into the company, there's just so much we don't know about genetics, and it's difficult to predict, especially certain disease risks with just the genes that they test. They don't test all the ones for breast cancer, for example, but they test the ones that are most known to lead to an increased risk in breast cancer.
Now, and switching gears, because I know you wear a lot of hats, you do a lot of different stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show to sort of kick all this off. This is obviously, it's a podcast we're doing here. You're actually a podcaster as well. Tell us about your show, STEManistas. I actually found out about it after obviously seeing you on Twitter and everything, and I started watching the stuff on YouTube and listening to the podcast. But tell everybody that's listening about the show.
Of course. So about a year and a half ago, me and another grad student, Rachel Battaglia, we started STEManistas as a YouTube channel. And our goal for STEManistas was to be two female scientists and allow people to see two female scientists. And we wanted to talk about science in the news, because so often you read articles or you see just these crazy tidbits on Twitter about coffee causing cancer or e-cigarettes being the next best thing, or that marijuana is awesome for curing all of these health ailments. Yeah. So we wanted to, since we were in grad school, and part of our job in grad school is learning to read like really deep scientific papers and being able to critique them. So we thought, well, why don't we do this with popular news stories and kind of go into the scientific literature behind these claims and see, okay, what does this paper actually say? Because a lot of the science articles you'll read online, they come from journalists who will have access to scientific articles, but they may not have a background in science itself. So they kind of have to go in and read the discussion and kind of make some conclusions based off of that. But I mean, even for scientists, it's difficult to see, well, what are the results from this study, even if it's written up. Yeah. So our goal was to basically give people the tools they needed to make decisions about these kind of topics. So if you listen to STEManistas, you'll kind of see there are very few things that we'll like have a specific take on. Most of the time, we'll just give you the facts from both sides.
Right. And that's something I can appreciate, because that's what we've been doing for a long time with, the Earhart project we worked on, and just kind of what we're doing now with Vanish and going into season 2 of that. So it's a totally different concept, but the foundation I think is the same. And so I really appreciate that specifically. What's the experience of podcasting been like? I mean, as far as a medium when it comes to just discussing science in general, I mean, how do you feel about just utilizing podcasting to get that message out there to a younger audience?
We have loved podcasting. We switched to podcasting about 4 months ago.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to try and record yourself than film yourself and click the button on the camera and then realize halfway through that the camera is like cutting off your eyes or that you're not focused correctly. Not that happened to us, but
Oh, sure.
And so with podcasting, we also, Rachel and I can like sit in a room together and not even have to look in a camera, which is really freeing. I didn't realize how freeing that would be until we've been in front of these microphones, and it's so much easier to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And with podcasting as well, we can be really strategic about the notes that we write, because we'll kind of make a show notes and actually kind of lay it out line by line of what we're going to say, just because that helps us stay on track.
Yeah.
A lot of times with the YouTube, we kind of had to figure out ahead of time what we were going to do and try and memorize it a little bit, because we tape our notes on the camera, but you can't like crane your neck in the middle of a sentence when you're on film. So it's been fantastic. And I think it's definitely reached a lot more people too, because people are more willing to listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to watch it. They can just listen on at the gym or
Sure.
getting groceries or being at home. So it's been awesome for that.
Yeah, driving, that's a huge thing. I mean, I listen to all my shows, while I'm driving, and I'll even QC our shows while I'm driving. It's pretty it's pretty transformative what podcasting I think has done. It's just blown up, and I think everybody that's out there, it's doing it is it's exciting. We utilize Zoom. That's what we're using to record this tonight, and we used to do the video chat feature with Zoom, and of course it's wonderful for that. But I found that as soon as you turn off the video chat and it's just audio, almost like a phone call with better audio quality,
Yeah.
people seem to relax a little bit more, because there's not a camera in their face. They're not expected to look a certain way. It's just a much more organic and kind of lax atmosphere when you're recording like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, you also blog as well. I was reading through the blog in preparation for the interview, and I feel like there's just something about writing. You can podcast, as we just talked about, you can create in so many different ways, but writing always feels more, it's almost more intimate than anything else. I mean, how's running the blog and how's writing been for you on the blog like that?
Wow, you've done your research.
We do.
So I started this blog probably back in high school. So there's some really old stuff on my blog, but I haven't been blogging as much in grad school. A lot of times I did it in college if I was struggling with a concept, or just I'd get in these like brain fuddles where I couldn't get out of them, and I just knew, okay, I have to sit and write, and I have to write something so I can figure out what is bothering me, how do I process through it, because I process much better through writing versus speaking.
Yeah.
Which is why I love writing show notes and being able to read what I wrote.
Sure. Yeah.
But with the blog recently, I don't really have any goals for it at the moment. There is one series of posts that I have been working on. I started a post last February where it was basically what I've learned in grad school, part 1. And I'm hoping for every year I'm in grad school to have kind of more points that I add to like in a new post about that. Just because there's so many things that people don't really think about when you're in grad school, and just also in trying to communicate to my family and my friends, hey, this is what I'm going through, without me like sending an angry message, because sometimes things can be misinterpreted, and especially if I'm asked the question of when are you going to graduate one more time.
Oh yeah.
Trying to say that in a nice way in a blog versus being like, please stop asking me this question.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, same thing with texting. Like if I'm talking to my wife, or talking to anybody really. I mean, dude, everybody we've been dealing with the project we just wrapped up and everything. It's like it's blogging is great. I love it. It's an intimate thing, but yeah, I mean, things can get lost in translation. I think a lot of times, especially because it just feels so cold. Sometimes when you're talking to people like that. So, but I did read the latest blog post, and it's very interesting, to get an inside look on what it's like to be a grad student. I think you present a very raw, sort of honest and easy to understand look at that. And at the top of your post, you mentioned you mentioned something that was pretty interesting, because we've talked to a lot of scientists, a lot of people that worked the Earhart case, and were, for instance, the group Tiger that was on Nicaragua, and they were actually investigating the island and doing all the work. And now, so a lot of that stuff is transferred to lab work and actually data analysis and all that stuff. And you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned something about spending 4 to 5 hours in a lab and potentially 4 to 5 hours performing data analysis or writing on something. In your opinion, I know it's probably a hard question to answer, but what's more valuable, do you think, when it comes to forwarding scientific research? I mean, is it all done? Is it more important to do the lab work? Is it more important to do the data analysis? Or is it about 50-50 usually?
Honestly, I'd say there's a lot more emphasis that should be placed on data analysis, because a lot of people, after they'll publish their articles for the world to read, they'll upload their data to a place where people can actually access it. So if someone's done a sequencing experiment, I can go and access their data and analyze it myself
Yeah.
and look for more things. So that's something I was actually having a conversation with a sociology person the other day, because they do a lot of work with public health, and they say that they basically use these huge public health repositories, and they don't do a lot of experimental work themselves. They basically just analyze data for their PhD.
Yeah.
And I think in science, one of the potential pitfalls is just focusing on, okay, we have this idea, let's go and experiment and let's do it, and almost focusing more on the experiment than the data analysis. And I've definitely been guilty of this too. I just want to get things done and get things checked off my list. So if I can get 10 experiments done in 3 weeks, then I feel much more accomplished than if I've sat working on a coding pipeline for a week and barely gotten anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And that kind of falls in line with some of the things that we've heard in the past, as far as, just talking to other folks that are kind of in the field and doing things, and they're kind of anxious to kind of get the actual work done, and not what they want to emphasize studying the result, because that's when you write the papers get written. That's when the analysis gets put out. That's when things get criticized, I guess, for lack of a better term, if something's not right. So
Mm-hmm.
I agree that that's I think the more exciting aspect of it. I love doing the experiments, love seeing people do the experiments, but actually, the results, the data, the actual analysis of that is, I think, the most crucial part. And in my opinion, I mean, it's a very unprofessional opinion, but in my opinion, um, a little further in the blog post, in the latest post, you make an interesting statement that I think it bears repeating here tonight. And we'll of course link to the blog and the show notes tonight and everything. But you say something really poignant, in my opinion. You say, my work should add something to the field I study so that other scientists can repeat my work and then build off of it. I've looked for a long time for a straight one-line answer to the question of what should science do, what are scientists' roles, and what it does. I mean, is that it? I mean, that seems to be a great answer. That seems to be it.
I mean, I would say so. When we go and decide what experiments we're going to do, or even just what to pursue in the lab, what we go back to every single time is to previously published articles, and those articles are other scientists building off of articles from the 70s. Like, a lot of the papers that I'll read are from 1970s and 1980s, because those people did a lot of pivotal work to my research.
Yeah.
So that at the end of the day, that's why we talk about scientific reproducibility being so important, because if you can't reproduce someone's results, then how can you trust that paper? And people kind of think of articles being published as, if they're published, then they've been vetted and the data is good. And yes, in most cases that's true, but there's also a lot of validation that when you use someone's paper to come up with an idea, you also kind of validate what they did.
Yeah.
And then when you publish about your work and include a citation to their work, you're basically saying, hey, I vetted their work. It's good. That what they said was true, because now my experiment is based off of it.
Yeah. Now, we kind of bounced around a little bit, but I want to ask you about just about education in general, and we'll start young here, but how important is it for children to have people around them, maybe not just teachers, but adults in general, that sort of push education and push, going past high school and a general college degree even? I mean, pursuing grad work and sort of taking it all the way. I mean, how important do you think that is for young people when it comes to molding them and kind of giving them that mindset?
I think it's crucially important. I think the culture that you grow up in completely shapes who you're going to be as a person, and especially educationally. Like, my husband and I have talked about this a lot, just because we kind of see some of the education disparities in our world, and we want to figure out how to fix it. And a lot of when we look back on our lives, we've had people like our parents who've really pushed education and put a priority on it. Even my grandparents, they have always encouraged me in pursuing college. They even set up somewhat of a college fund for me and have always put emphasis on knowing how well you're doing academically and educationally.
Yeah.
And even besides academics, my family always has focused on going. And one thing we actually did, which you might find kind of cool with the Earhart stories, my great uncle was a pilot during World War II, and his plane crashed in action back in December 19th, 1944. But for the past, I think, 13, 14 years, I've been going to these bomber group reunions and getting to meet guys from not his specific crew because they went down, but others from his squadron. And my family's always put emphasis on these other educational experiences to help round you out as a person and help you to see these people that have done these things for you, they have built on it, and now you can build on it for the next generation.
Yeah. Oh, that's power. It really is. Yeah, that's, I mean, what's been done in the past. And it's funny because talking about kind of as we kind of go into STEM here a little bit and kind of walk the conversation that way, I want to ask you about that. I mean, it's doing the research that we've done on Earhart. It's really incredible to see someone like her in the 20s, the mid 20s, the late 20s. I mean, all the way up to the point to about almost a year and a half or so before she disappeared. She was she's at Purdue University. She's in these classes. She's telling women, hey, you want to be a scientist, you can. You want to fly, you can. You want to do all these things, you can do that. And it's pretty remarkable to see sort of this woman who did so many things with her life. Really, she was a pioneer in STEM before STEM was even STEM, before it was even known as that. And I feel like she was, that's when I do interviews and things, I try to tell people she was, almost 100 years ahead of her time. She really was, as far as kind of what she could see and where she could see science going and where she could see these careers in aviation and things going. And I think people like that, to kind of circle back to the original question about, having people around you. I mean, even role models, even people that like yourself, young women who, might look up to you or say, I want to be a geneticist. I don't know anybody that is. They could see someone like you on a podcast, on your YouTube channel doing that. I think that can provide a really unexpected but much needed boost for someone who will, write science, for the next generation, essentially.
Oh, completely. Like, I attribute a lot of my abilities and interest in science to my mom finding people for me to talk to. We would go and I remember talking to a geneticist at Duke and her telling me kind of maybe the roadmap that I could take if I wanted to pursue genetics at State. And then kind of having those same conversations when I was trying to figure out grad school. So those people took valuable time out of their day and then impacted the course of my career. Yeah. So I love any of those opportunities where I can give back to students. And I actually recently got to talk in my old high school honor society about just being in college and the importance of community in college and just things like that. You don't know how it's going to impact someone, but it's being faithful to the people that came before you and saying, okay, they helped me, let me now help the next generation.
You make an interesting point, and that kind of begs the question, like, are young girls, are women in general, is there any kind of disadvantage in your opinion when it comes to careers in STEM? I mean, we've tried to incorporate so many women into chasing Earhart and to what we did, but is there any kind of disadvantage? Is there any kind of unfair playing field in your opinion?
I've never been discriminated against as a woman, which I'm very thankful for, but I do see if you want to pursue a career in academia and you want to also have a family, it can be very difficult. And that's probably one reason why I'm planning not to pursue a career in academia, just because I know the stakes that it takes and you have to give your 110% all the time.
Right.
And there are so many successful female faculty who balance both and balance it wonderfully. I don't know if I could personally do that, but I went to a conference about women in science, and women faculty tend to be more proactive about giving back to that next generation.
Yeah.
And the male faculty tend to be more focused on writing their grants, and which the women faculty still do, but at the end of the day, your performance as in academia is measured by how much money you get and the grants that you get and the papers that you publish.
Yeah.
So in that way, I think women are trying to figure out, okay, how much of this should we do and how can we be rewarded for it?
Yeah.
the government doesn't really reward based off of your outreach activities. Certain places like the National Science Foundation will, but I think that's something that could be really important to start shifting in the future, is to have more emphasis placed on outreach, because that is how people, like young kids, learn about science, get excited about it, and even people later on in life have a lifelong love of science.
Yeah. And well, I mean, and that I think that in seeing women scientists, that's obviously going to be a big deal. I mean, if they see women doing what they want to do, regardless of what area of science it is, that's going to be a huge help, I think, as well.
For sure.
It's funny because we did we interviewed so many people for the Earhart thing, and I've never been intimidated by anybody except for one person. I remember interviewing Dr. Anita Sengupta. We actually watched her presentation in Los Angeles. She designed, or she helped design the supersonic parachute for the Curiosity rover.
Whoa.
And yeah, this woman, I had interviewed, people, the guys that took part in finding the Titanic. I mean, there was just the guest list was so vast. This woman scared the crap out of me. I was never so, because she's such a powerful force, and she's just a rock star. And it's like you want, you see certain people that are just sort of like the embodiment of what Earhart stood for so many years ago. And it's like a natural evolution. It's really a beautiful thing. But she told a story during her talk, and the talk was, they would go out to the desert, and I guess they would try to they would test for the parachute for the Curiosity rover. And she showed a picture at the end of that talk, and it was like her and like 25 dudes in the picture, and it was just like she was the only woman.
Mm.
And I remember she had mentioned, like, we're approaching the big 50-50 number, right? Like we're approaching 50-50 in medical. Like we're getting there. We're not there, but we're getting there. We're approaching 50-50 in legal, but we're just not there in science. And I want to ask you, like, what your opinion is on that. What is your opinion on where we're at when it comes to that 50-50 number in STEM? I mean, I know it's not going to be perfectly balanced, but I mean, how close are we? I mean, where are we at with that, do you think?
So I'm at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, for my PhD, and I feel like there's more women than men, which is really, really great to be around.
Yeah.
I think in terms of STEM as a whole, I still think it's more male dominated. My husband's an engineer, and he definitely says that there's very few, even in his company, very few like female design engineers that are there.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think universities are doing a lot to increase and incorporate, and kind of getting rid of some of the bias that's there, and really encouraging young women to pursue degrees in STEM. I mean, you even see
Yeah.
it now in young kids where they have like Science Barbie and different science games, which I am all for.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's very true. I mean, I see that. We talk to a lot of young girls that are kind of pursuing careers in STEM, people that want to go to the moon and just all these incredible things. It's a really beautiful thing to see that it doesn't matter if you're male or female. I mean, I've never seen that. I've never seen kind of any barrier like that personally. Just it doesn't occur to me, but I mean, I know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those situations where, and I've also heard horror stories of like my co-host for Vanish. It's like she's a criminal defense attorney in Austin, and it's funny, like she always tells me, like, every time I go to court, or a lot of times when I go to court, like they all automatically assume I'm the paralegal. Like they don't assume I'm the attorney, and it's like,
Wow.
it's really sad. And her and I laugh about it because she has a very great sense of humor, but it is a very sad situation. It's like, and it's just, I don't understand why it is that way. And I'm hoping that the further along we get, the more blended the lines become, and it just doesn't matter. It's like, the person's a scientist regardless if it's male or female. It doesn't really matter. That's not really part of the whole idea. So
Right, right.
it's frustrating. It's sad. I mean, and I feel for some of the stories that I've heard, and I hope it changes fully. Like, I hope it does a complete 180. That's my personal hope anyway. Here's a question that when I said I was going to have you on the show, and I talked to a few different people, they wanted me to ask you this, and I think it's a good question. So it has to do with pop culture. I mean, pop culture, obviously, it plays a big role, the general public's understanding of sort of how things work, who people are, what certain fields are like. There's been a really big pop culture explosion when it comes to science, I think, in the last 5 to 7 years, probably longer than that. But I mean, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, you have TV shows like Big Bang Theory, and you have like all these rock star in STEM, like a Neil deGrasse Tyson, Brian Greene, all these people. Does that exposure, do you think, like in the pop culture sphere, does that help progress sort of the interest in science? Like, does making it quote unquote cool do it a positive service, do you think?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'd say there's kind of two sides to this. I think getting science out there and accessible, like I've read Astrophysics for Busy People by Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Sure, yeah.
Loved that book. Really accessible. Made me excited about astrophysics, which physics was not my strong suit in college. But on the flip side of that, you have mainly, I think of like three main scientists who are out in the pop culture sphere. And they have said things that are very offensive. I've been to talks with some of them, and they've called out certain groups and kind of marginalized them. And so they are in a very tough position because they are who people look up to as scientists.
Sure.
And all three of them have not done the best job of kind of being gracious to lots of people and just showing people like, hey, science is awesome because everyone can do science, and we're not gonna bias based off of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Here's what I want to know. This is one of the things that I was most excited to talk to you about, or just, I think it was the most important thing. So like when I was a kid, like I was raised Catholic, and all my life I feel like I've had a real closeness with God, even during the times that, looking back now, I feel like I may have gone astray. Like I had double heart surgery.
Wow.
I've been through a lot. I thought I was going to die. It was a really dark period in my life. And I just didn't have that closeness, I think, now looking back in hindsight. But I want to ask you how important your faith is in your life, because you're pretty open about it on social media, which I absolutely love. And I think that's barrier breaking, to be honest with you. And so I want to ask you about that. Like, how important is your faith in your life? How does that balance work? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, thanks, first of all, for saying that you enjoy seeing it on social media, because that's one thing. When I kind of started getting into Twitter, I debated, okay, my faith is completely and totally utterly important to me.
Yeah.
Should I, like, being in a science sphere, how much of that should I promote?
Right.
And at the end of the day, I was like, this is me, and I'm also a scientist. And there have been many points in my life where I've wondered, can I be both of these things at the same time? So that's when I made that decision, kind of talked to my husband and some other people in my church, just, I'm going to put this out there, and this is who I am. But I would say my relationship with God is so important to me. I was raised in a Christian home and have always had that as a way to ground me. And I mean, people say a lot when they're in grad school, you have to have other things besides science that you are interested in. And it's immeasurably true, because things go wrong all the time. You wonder what's happening. I mean, even just in normal day situations, we have all these circumstances that happen that we don't know how to deal with. But what gives me joy, and what keeps me faithful, and why I continue in science, is my relationship with Christ, and just how much that I can rely on that during the day when things don't go wrong. And my joy is not set in if my experiment works, if my husband and I have a great day together, if I feel good in my body. All of that is just set in where my foundation is.
Yeah.
And that helps me so much through everyday life.
Wow, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. That is something that I've definitely was looking forward to talking with you about the most, I think. I mean, and that's you mentioned, I know you mentioning kind of like, there seems to be like a stigma wall, if you're in science, it's almost like a science versus religion thing. I hate that personally. I really do. I think it's
Me
like
too.
you can have, but like, well, you can't have both. You can't be scientific and be religious from it. It's like, no, you really can. It's it's not like it's not an impossibility. And so I think to hear someone talk about that from your standpoint and kind of from your platform is really remarkable. And I really hope and pray that you keep doing that, because that's a wonderful thing. I really believe that is.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, one thing that people don't really think about, science, you also have to have faith in science too. There are lots of things we don't know in science. And I think that's kind of helped me come to that point of rationalizing the two together and being like, well, I don't know these things about God, and I don't know these things about science. So I can still go forward knowing that God loves me and cares for me, and keep going.
Yeah, 100%. So my last question, and this is from my son. So he's 10 years old, and this is a legit question. So he wants to know, can we really create a real Captain America, and do you know how? That's the question. I was like, what do you want me to ask her? That's what he said. He thought about it for a few minutes. He's like, ask her that. I was like, okay, I'll ask her that for you then.
I have a 12-year-old sister who wants to be a scientist, so I get a lot of those sort of questions. But,
Yeah.
well, I mean, we know how to clone things. Dolly the sheep was cloned, I guess. I think it was in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
Oh, and okay, that is the question that I get asked all the time is, are you going to make another Dolly the sheep? That is what people ask me as a geneticist. Or are you going to genetically edit yourself?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah,
So,
that's an interesting one. Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, I thought of those as that comment came up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I mean, people have the technology. There's the technology of if you have a cell and each cell has a nucleus in it, and basically you can take the nucleus out of one cell and replace it with the nucleus from another cell. So that's how they created Dolly the sheep, which was a clone of the original. As far as humans go, I think we could make a clone. There's the technology there to do it. There's just ethically definitely not allowed. And even if you are able to make a clone, there's so much to do with epigenetics, which is basically, epigenetics means above genetics. And so it's basically those kind of like bolds or those highlights that I mentioned before that can happen to your DNA code. And so then when you're having these genes being converted into proteins, these proteins may be different based off of these highlights, and it may tell the body, oh, you need to make more of this protein versus this protein.
Sure.
So that all happens from your environment. Especially, there's a lot of environmental factors depending on, say, even you were born via C-section versus not, or just the environment of the birth mom. So I think it would be possible to make a clone, but I don't think it would not be an exact like epigenetic clone.
Yeah.
Even twins aren't epigenetic clones.
That's incredible. Okay, well, on that note, I would love for you, before we get out of here tonight, to plug the YouTube channel, plug the podcast, put it all out there, all that jazz, so people can kind of follow you online, follow the show, all that good stuff.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I'd love for you guys to check out Aneesa's pod on Twitter. We post all of our episodes on there, and you can also listen to Aneesa's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And basically what we do every week is we take these topics, like one of the ones we actually posted today was about e-cigarettes and looking at the safety behind e-cigarettes. So we'll go to these original papers, read the research, and try and distill that research for you to decide, okay, what do I think about this topic? And our goal is not to tell you what to think. It's more to give you the tools that you need.
Yeah.
So you can, if you have anything that you want us to cover, we've had people suggest ideas to us. We've done videos on probiotics and essential oils. Our DMs are always open. And if you want to follow me, I am Genetic Ginger on Twitter, and I also have a blog at geneticginger.com.
This has been, I say this a lot, but tonight it really is especially true. This has been a genuine pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Emma. Thank you for everything you do, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I feel honored to be the inaugural guest on this podcast, and I hope that I'm an encouragement to the future generations.
If you made it all the way through our conversation tonight, I want to thank you for hanging out with me and my friends. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Please visit us on social media as we post each new conversation as they air, news, show information, and much more. Go to facebook.com/me and my friends pod. On Twitter, you can search the handle me my friends pod. And on Instagram, you can find us by searching the handle at me and my friends pod. If you enjoyed our conversation tonight, please do me a favor and head to iTunes to rate us and leave us a review. As a brand new podcast, we need all the help we can get, and your time is truly appreciated. Me and My Friends is produced by Vanessa Williamson and edited by me, Chris Williamson. Tonight, the podcast featured the original song Pink Lemonade by producer Redeman. The opinions on Me and My Friends are those of the individual guests and may not reflect those of Chris Evan Films Incorporated. Chris Evan Films Incorporated is not affiliated with the films or clips referred to herein. Any audio clips used in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purposes of education and entertainment, and no infringement is ever intended. Me and My Friends is an exclusive trademark of Chris Evan Films Incorporated and may not be used without the express written consent of Chris Evan Films Incorporated. All rights reserved. Me and My Friends is a Chris Evan Films production, copyright 2020, all rights reserved.